Hello everyone, it's a great pleasure to be here. My name's Tom Scott and as you just heard, I'm head up the digital department at Wellcome. For those, that's not working. There we go, it is working. You have to press the right button. I do work in a digital department, I promise you. So for those that don't know, Wellcome is a global independent charity funded through an investment portfolio of about 26 billion UK pounds. Our purpose in existing is that we want to improve human health. We improve human health by trying to help great ideas to thrive. That means that we invest heavily in the research agenda, but also run Wellcome Collection. Wellcome Collection is our free museum and library. If you're in London on the Euston Road, you'll be very welcome. Alternatively, you can go to any web browser, and we're also there. Wellcome Collection is there to create opportunities for people to think differently about the connections between science, medicine, life, and art. And we do that by programming exhibitions, events, and creating content, both in print and digitally, and by trying to improve access to the diverse perspectives held within our collections. Wellcome Collection, and indeed Wellcome, is because of this man. This is Henry Wellcome. He was a philanthropist and formed the drug company, which later became the Wellcome Drug Company, the profits of which went to form the foundation. During the end of the 18th century and the early 20th century until his death, he also was very acquisitive in terms of his personal acquisition of material that related in a very, very broad sense to the human health or the human condition. And that means that we have collections, personal archives like this one of John Dixon. John Dixon was a medical officer of health officer in London, in Bermondsey. But because he's also a human being, the papers include lots of other things, not only his professional records. So we hold records on his personal writings. He had an interest in board games, in languages, in photography, and cactuses. All of that's held within those collections. We also hold the archive of Francis Crick. So Francis Crick, along with James Watson, Rosalind Franklin, and others, was responsible for the identification of the structure of DNA, which has laid the foundation for most of our modern molecular biology, including, a bit difficult to see, but his original sketch of what he thought DNA looked like at the bottom there. We also hold archives on other organisations. So, for example, DrugScope, which was a UK charity, came together from a number of other charities in 2000 until its disbanding in 2015, looking at the use of illegal drugs within the UK and trying to provide support for people suffering with that. It's not only modern archives and modern material, we also hold a large collection of older material. So this is a manuscript listing the Scottish witches from the 15th century. Scottish witches were mostly women, could have been men. It was a capital crime until the mid-15th century, and about 5,000 people were hung as a result of being identified as a witch. You might wonder why witches and why that's in a collection that is predominantly about medicine. Well, at the time, witches were really healers. It wasn't modern medicine. People went to the local healer to become cured. If they didn't get cured, they might get a bit grumpy and accuse them of being a witch. They read in that book, and then they got hung. We also have artwork. So this is a sketch from with James Gilray to prove that there's nothing new under the world. This is Edward Jenner. So Edward Jenner was the man responsible for vaccinations. So he developed the first smallpox vaccination, the first vaccination, which was for smallpox. And at that time, in the late 19th century, there's a lot of resistance to it. And so you can see here he's being mocked for trying to get people to be vaccinated. So he's been vaccinated on the left-hand side after they've been vaccinated. You can see the sort of pustules growing out into cattle as a way of trying to sort of indicate how dangerous it is. The little boy in the blue coat on the side there is dressed in the uniform from a poorhouse, sort of trying to undermine his credibility further. We also hold other artworks, or other material. So these are glass plate negatives from John Thompson, who Henry Wellcome acquired in the sort of first part of the 20th century. John Thompson was a Scottish geographer and photographer, and he travelled all over the world, including Asia, photographing what he saw. The image on the left is the material sort of developed, if you like, but sort of through photography, through digitisation. And the image on the right is the original glass plate negative. We also have modern archives. So this is an example of an AIDS poster. We have a very, very large collection of public health material, including AIDS awareness posters from around the world. And modern contemporary photography, in this case, this is from a neonatal ward in St Pancras Hospital in London. But that breadth, that range of material presents our first problem, because most people don't know that. In fact, the people in this room now probably know as much about the breadth and depth of our collection as many of the people that might want to access Wellcome Collection. And at the moment, because the only way to access the collection is through search, and if you don't know what's in there, you don't know what you can search for, people don't find most of the material. Our second problem is that they don't really know what they're searching over. Google has taught people that you can search for everything. It's a free text search. Type in a word, you'll find the word. That isn't true for our collections. What we have is metadata. We have catalogue information, and we have images. This is a photograph of a recipe book. So we also have a large recipe book collection. In this case, it's a herring recipe. Again, at the time, recipes were medicine. That's how you found out how to get cured. Our third problem is lack of context. So this is the letter from John Moore. John Moore would go on to become Lord Mayor of London and a Prime Minister. Sorry, I beg your pardon, a Member of Parliament. But in 1665, he was writing back to his brother. He was concerned that the number of plague deaths had increased and that his nephew was at risk if he stayed in London, and was wondering whether he should go back to the country to be safer. It's a lovely item in itself, but it becomes much more interesting when you cross-reference it with this document. This is the Bills of Mortality, which describe the number of deaths that happened in London at that period. And what you can see is two things. One, it's the first week that the number of deaths from the plague passes into 4 figures. And also, it's the first time that it jumps from the poor parts of London into the city of London. So the document becomes more useful once you place the context. And this is effectively what we've done in creating digital access. So on the plus side, we've gone from paper catalogues, which you can't search, into digital catalogues that you can, but we've atomized our collection to the point where they're no longer understandable. You can find the material, but it doesn't really make sense once you find it. I say find it, it's actually not true, because in theory you can find it. In practice, we have about 15% click-through rate. So most people can't actually search, or at least most people can't find and discover the material. Now, our fourth and final problem is, how do we provide access to all? We want to make sure that as diverse and large a range of people as possible can access our collections. And that's not just a sort of a moral statement, although we do think that that's the right thing to do, but also it's fundamental to our purpose. We try to fund best ideas. We don't know where those best ideas can come from, and the only way of getting the best ideas is to have a large number of ideas from a large number of perspectives. Right. So that's the problem that we face. So what are we doing to to solve it. So the first thing is that we have a fairly large digitisation program running. So we digitise books. This is a photograph of the book digitisation suite at Wellcome Collection. We also digitise ephemera. We don't have clones. That's one person shot a number of different times. We also photograph manuscripts. So that's Marie Curie's manuscript, and yes, that thing on the side is a Geiger counter. And paintings and artworks. Sometimes we digitize material not just for the informational content, but also for the materiality, trying to describe and identify what this object is like. So these are so-called fugitive sheets. Fugitive sheets were designed to help medics or medical students understand basic anatomy before they got to the work. Sorry, I beg your pardon. My phone has just spoken to me for some reason. But digitization isn't really sufficient. So we have digitized rapidly approaching 300,000 individual items and about 40 million individual images. However, in a 6-month window, 71% of those items weren't looked at. 7% were viewed once, and, well, a very small number, a rounding error really, was viewed a lot. You might think that's because our collection's boring and no one wants to look at it. Not true. Because of how we license our material, so we openly license the material, make it as permissively as licensed as possible, we can make that material available on lots of different platforms. In the same 6-month window, that material was viewed almost 8 million times on the Internet Archive and over 750 million times on Wikipedia. But it isn't sufficient just to rely on other people's platforms. We need to be able to help people find and make sense of this material on our own platform. We needed a new approach. We needed a new approach because the existing systems that were available to us, not just the ones that we were using, but also the others that provided this discovery layer, weren't up to the job, weren't able to deliver the services that we wanted and provide the experience that we wanted to offer people. So we hired an in-house development team and built an infrastructure on AWS, Amazon's web service, so sort of cloud computing. And this is an overview of what we're building. Someone says it doesn't matter too much what's in the boxes. The point really is that we've got 3 broad areas of work. At the bottom is preservation, so the workflow tools that allow us to get digitized and born digital content in, a way of making sure that it's all safe. Data, so that the way we can handle all the metadata associated with the material that we have, so that people can use it. And experience, so how people actually interface and discover and use the material, the human bit. From a storage point of view, this is sort of what it looks like. So we heard yesterday? Day before. I've lost track of time. About Archivematica. Archivematica is used to provide the workflow for our born digital material. And Gooby, which is a workflow tool for digitized content, is used for the digitization program. That generates this open standard Baggett files, which are a sort of way of packaging up information in an open, accessible way. And then we have this storage service, which makes sure everything's safe, everything's the way that it should be, and then orchestrates the delivery to different platforms. So at the moment, we are able to store this information in 2 geographical locations on AWS, one in Dublin in Ireland and one in the Netherlands, and a second one in a different company, Azure's service in Dublin. We recently migrated all of that information. I unfortunately don't have my notes with me because it was on my laptop, which I didn't use. But we had about 56 terabytes of data that got migrated, and nobody noticed that we'd done it, which is how it should have been. One thing that you can say about libraries is that they provide a fantastic reading experience. So this is the reading room at Wellcome Collection. Online, too often, we don't try to create as good a reading experience. We force people to read through letterboxes, through this sort of mean, nasty interface. So how do we create an interface that works as well as the physical environment, but online? We're certainly not there yet, but we're starting to explore what this might look like. So we've got interfaces that let you quickly browse the contents of a book, or an archive, or a piece of digitized material, and then delve down and read and focus on the material itself without being distracted by lots of other superfluous bits of interface. We heard about the importance of making this text available. So the problem with these images is that machines and people that require assistive technologies can't read those images. So when we digitize books, we run those images through a piece of technology which converts the pictures of words into words, and we add that as alt text to our web pages. That means that Google can see it, index it, and make people aware and able to discover the information through the Google platform. But it also means that if you rely on assistive technologies, it will read it to you, so you can hear what's being written in those digitized books. In terms of discovery, because we have this problem that most of the content that we have can't be discovered, we need a different approach to that. So this is effectively what we're in the process of building, or have built, in fact, this bit. So we have a library catalog. Library catalog is, for those that are interested in such things, is catalogued to Mark 21 records. The archive catalog, which is a ISAD-G catalog. At the moment, you have to know which one's which before you can search, which isn't very helpful. We also have digitization metadata. We're trying to bring all of that stuff together to create a unified search. And then we take that unified search data and enrich it further. So we can bring in external data, for example, from Wikipedia, apply machine learning models, artificial intelligence, to create contextual discovery. And what that means is that we can start to process this and use machines to provide extra information, extra knowledge about our collections to help people do interesting things with it. So this is a collection-level record from one of the archives that we hold. It's the Abortion Law Reform Association. As a human, you can read that and it makes sense to you. As a machine, not so much. But what we can do is, through machine learning, we can add structure to it. So we can identify the things in there that people might be interested in and provide links through that space. So rather than it being a search and find something, I now have a browsable space where I can click and follow my nose to find the things that are interesting. We can also use machine learning to interrogate the images itself. So in this case, what we're doing is we're trying to find, extract the features that are held within the image itself, not the metadata, to find similar images. So those sort of, broadly speaking, look similar. We can also do the same thing for color. So we can allow people to search and discover things by color palette. But we can also start to do things that are slightly more magical. So this is a search not over any words, only using the image. So the machine learning, the machine vision, has looked at the attributes in this image and allowed me to search for an old wooden boat and found those images. I've cheated a little. That one works really well. Some of them work really, really, really badly, which is why it's not live on the site. So that's our collections. We also want to provide other ways into this information. So we want to tell stories. People like stories. People engage with stories. So we have a strong editorial function, both on the website and in social media, where we try to provide different contexts, different ways into this information. So in some cases, we use our collections, we use our archives to tell stories that we know to be true because we hold this collection, but to place it within a modern context. So in this case, we're looking at fake news and the flu. So it's the centenary of the flu pandemic of 1919, which, for those that don't know, actually ended up killing more people than the First World War. But at the time, there was a lot of misinformation about it, in the same way that there is today about other topics. We also use our archives to create and commission other work. So we commissioned Illustrator to look at some of the material in our collection and create these illustrations. These illustrations highlight some of the works of lesser-known scientists and researchers in the area of medicine. But it's not just our collection, so we want to try to give voice to people that otherwise aren't represented in our collections. So this is a commission that we did over a week where people living with disabilities were given the opportunity to tell their story in their words, in their way. And we photographed that, provided a platform for them to be able to tell their stories. So how are we doing it? So the first thing is it's not about technology. This really is about people, culture, and process. And it's about how we then use that to meet or exceed people's expectations. I'm not sure you can read that from here, but anyway, it doesn't really matter. These are sort of the broad principles that we sort of try to hold to be true when we're dealing with digital material. Central to that is the way that we think about working with people. We spend a lot of time, every 2 weeks in fact, we get people to come in or we engage with people online around either the things that we're developing, to get people to test stuff and see what they think of it, or to get them in to talk to us about what they're doing. So in this case, looking at the materials that they produce and sketch out and describe how they tackle their job. Not how they use our website, but what it is that they do in trying to research things. Here we are, she's sketching out her workflow. We've got some sample material to help us sort of exemplify what that might look like. We do this a lot, so we end up with a lot of data. We take all of this information and we try to make sense of it. We sort of stick it up on walls and try to help see patterns in there, and then use those patterns to create two important artifacts. One of which are sort of sketches of people, of what we think people care about and the concerns they have. So these are sort of so-called personas. And also map out the journey that people go through. So this is one type of person going through one type of journey, looking at the different stages they go through, what type of activity they're trying to do, and emotionally how they feel about things. So are they happy? Are they frustrated? And where the frustration is, those are the places where we should probably be focusing to try to improve things. One of the reasons I'm here is that we want to be open about what we do. So I am very, very pleased to be invited to be here, but also it is part of my job to be here, to try to share what we've learned and the way that we do it. And we do that not just by conferences, but also by the things that we make. So in addition to that interface that we've seen a sort of hint of, if you're a programmer, you can get hold of the raw data through APIs, so ways in which software engineers can write software to access the material that we have available. There's no secret sauce in what we build. These are the things that we use too. We also do so to conform with existing open standards, notably IIIF, which is a way of a lot of museums, libraries, and archives are collaborating on a common way of delivering images. And all of the software that we produce, all of it, is licensed openly under an MIT open source license. So others are at liberty. In fact, I'd love it if people would take it, use it, learn from it, reuse it. And our thought process behind it is also open. So these, where we're sort of working through a problem, we document what that looks like and what we've learned. The other aspect of how we work is a sort of measurement of done is based on performance, not features. So we never start off by saying we need to build these features. We always start off by saying we need to make this better for people. An example of that is search. So in this case, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make our search better, but we also need to make sure that we don't, by accident, make it worse for some people. So we have dashboards that monitor how our search performance is going. When we come up with an idea, and that idea can come from qualitative testing, so we can pop up little ways of asking people whether the search results were better or good or not, we can then split the traffic. So we put this idea in front of people, half the audience, half the users get one version of search, and half get the other. It's a test, it's an experiment. And our users judge us, based on their clicks, which one works best. So nobody internally signs this off. It's our users who are the boss. So how are we doing? So on search, we started off with a 15% click-through, which is frankly dismal. And we're now up to 54%, which is better. What's also interesting is that you can see in there that people behave differently. So this is a graph, or two graphs. The left one is looking at the number of clicks per session, and then the one on the right is the click position. And what you can see here is that there are actually two types of behavior going on. One type of behavior is, I know what I'm looking for, I'm just trying to find it. And that's the single session. The other is, I'm researching this. I want to find everything that you have on this topic, and I'm going to look at the lot. And what you can see there is that people will literally click on the top. You have search sessions that last over 12 hours. Now, if you don't know that that's what's happening, you're likely to build a search interface that doesn't work for one group or the other. There's a lot I could say about how we organize our teams. The one thing I will say is that the way we organize our teams is not around technology, not around projects. We sort of fundamentally believe that the way to handle this is to focus teams in the long term around the problem that they're trying to solve, and that they work on that problem for as long as they work there. And you put in place the people that are the right people to solve the job and trust them to do a good job. That's all I have to say about that. There are links to things that you might find interesting. Other than that, thank you very much for your time.